Emiliano Martinez from Aston Villa has been offered to Chelsea in order to solve our absolutely ridiculous goalkeeper situation as of right now. Chelsea have sold Liam Delap to Nottingham Forest for up to £50 million. I can't wait to get into this one. Man City are edging ever closer to making their opening offer for want-away midfielder Enzo Fernandez. Aston Villa are trying to get creative around buying Nicolas Jackson in order not to lose all of the profit from the Morgan Rogers sale. And Bournemouth remain adamant that midfielder Alex Scott is going nowhere, but if Chelsea want him, they are still determined to try and make it happen. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And I do apologise, I didn't upload yesterday. I was in London with Jay from Talking Chelsea whilst we plus our takeover of the YouTube content space for Chelsea creators, right? But in all of that time, there's been news, so some of it I'm a little bit late to the party with, but let's just kick off with the big news from today, and it is about goalkeeper Emiliano Martinez. Wild stuff. So David Ornstein has just posted exclusive Emiliano Martinez offered to Chelsea by representatives and West London club considering possibility of signing the 33-year-old goalkeeper before the transfer window finishes. Aston Villa open to Argentina international exit after Zion Suzuki made number one, and Chelsea are keen. So look, I guess what I can do in this as well, because I missed my wins and losers from the Fulham game, I can talk about ultimately what I think is one of the only really negative parts about that game was the performance of Robert Sanchez, right? Not going to lie, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I have been saying this for a long time. Robert Sanchez is not good enough to be the Chelsea number one. The issue we saw with Robert Sanchez is the issue I predicted happening, albeit I did not expect it to happen quite as quickly as the first game. He is going to be dropped because of confidence issues. It's happened every single season at this point. And look, man, it just is what it is, isn't it? It just is what it is. Like, he's not good enough. Is Penders good enough? We don't know. That's the question. So this is why this becomes really interesting, because another thing I've been parroting for a while is what I think we need is a experienced goalkeeper who's kind of been there and done it, right? So if we were to go in for an Emiliano Martinez, is that still a competition between Martinez and Mike Penders? I'm not so convinced, because I think with Mike Penders only being 20 years old, you loan him out to develop and improve, right? Because what I don't think will be good for Penders is to sit on the bench or get 8 games or 9 games or whatever like Philip Jorgensen was doing, right? So if we're going to go in for an Emiliano Martinez, then for me it actually makes more sense to loan out Mike Penders than it does to sell Robert Sanchez. Robert Sanchez becomes the de facto number 2. We haven't got Europe this season. Martinez will be able to play most games, and then we give Penders a solid year somewhere else to go and develop. But either way, what I think we can all agree on is Sanchez can't be the number one goalkeeper for Chelsea. And you know what? I don't often agree with Jamie Carragher, but he was spot on. You ain't challenging for nothing if Robert Sanchez is your number one goalkeeper. Look at all of the teams that have won the Premier League in recent memory, and not just in recent memory, for a long time. There's never a question over your goalkeeper. You know, Alisson was never a question for Liverpool. Edison was never a question for Man City. Even when Leicester did it, Kasper Schmeichel, there was never a question about him, and there's been no question about Raya at Arsenal for the last few seasons now. I'm not saying we're going in for a title challenge, but I'm saying if that's something we want to build towards, Robert Sanchez, with a big question mark over his head about how does he feel today? Is he confident? Do you know he's going to make mistakes? We can't have this going forward. So, Emiliano Martinez, I like him as a goalkeeper. Like, the Argentina thing, I guess, is a little bit hot at the moment. We saw how the Fulham fans reacted to Enzo Fernandez in particular, but I don't think Martinez was he's not been getting booed by opposition fans when he's playing for Aston Villa. So, look, it just is what it is. I think Martinez is the kind of keeper that I think we should go for. The question that it leaves is, what do we keep Sanchez or do we keep Penders? I actually think keep Sanchez as a number 2 and get rid of Penders at that point, because you would expect Martinez at 33 years old, which isn't super old for a goalkeeper, to be able to play the majority of the games anyway. So, David Ornstein obviously came out with the exclusive, but as you would expect, Fabrizio Romano had something to say about it as well. Chelsea Dodgers reposted, breaking, Emiliano Martinez would say yes to Chelsea move, and it is open to if Chelsea decides to proceed. So, look, it's not going to be expensive. It's more of what Xabi Alonso wants, with experience, like good experience. Like, they won the Europa League last season. He's, been really, really good for Aston Villa for a long time. And he's won the World Cup with Argentina before. So he's got good international experience. He's got good Premier League experience. And look, stylistically, I don't know a huge amount about whether he fits the play out from the back kind of thing, but he can't be worse than Sanchez. And at the end of the day, he's been a mainstay, a key figure for Aston Villa's, kind of backline for years now, hasn't he? And he's been a big part of kind of getting them to the burgeoning Premier League force that they're becoming, where they do keep on pushing season on season. So I'm kind of for it, to be honest, and maybe that's mainly not even me being for him as it is against Robert Sanchez, and I want Mike Penders to develop. Look, if Mike Penders plays against Luton and Brighton and absolutely smashes it, then okay, maybe there's enough there to say, maybe Mike Penders is worth giving the shot. But I think with Mike, you're expecting Mike Penders to not be at his full potential yet because he's only 20 years old. And for me, a keeper like Martinez is exactly the kind of keeper that we need. We always had him for years and years and years and years. We had Rob Green and Enrique Hilario and, Asmir Begovic was like one of my favourite ones. Willie Caballero. We've kind of always had these older keepers kind of knocking in and around the background. Maybe Martinez could come in as a first choice keeper and transition into that, so we've got an experienced head around the club. Guys, let me know what you think about this one in the comments, but Martinez to Chelsea could be a crazy story. And guys, if you have made it this far into today's episode of the Stamford Sink, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so we're going to carry on with the news, and a lot of this stuff dropped yesterday, man, but the first thing I've got to talk about, I need to talk about this. Absolutely generational work from Chelsea. Liam Delap is gone! Yes! Chelsea Dodgers reposted this via Fabrizio Romano. It's time for Liam Delap's Nottingham Forest medical today. £45 million fee plus 5 million add-ons. 50 mil total deal. The market is going to be crazy in the next hours and days. 50 mil for, mate, how? Look, ultimately, I don't really care how. That is wild. That is such an impressive sale. And look, I was one of the guys, a little bit early, a couple of weeks ago, it's it does start to feel like we're starting to leave things kind of late. We've still got all of these players that we need to get rid of, and Liam Delap was obviously a big one. And the interesting thing about Liam Delap is there's been interest in him since before the window opened. Everton and Newcastle were all and obviously Nottingham Forest have come into it in the last few weeks, with them obviously selling a striker to Coventry. They were one light and they wanted to reinforce. They've got Oliver Glasner there now. They want to give him the most opportunity or whatever. And I was starting to get concerned. I was like, bro, if we get left with Liam Delap on our books for next season, that's going to suck. But no, lo and behold, fair play to Blueco. They held out. And look, 45 million, even if they don't get any of the add-ons, which they probably will, because they're normally pretty good at negotiating these things as well. 45 mil for Liam Delap is already wild. 50 mil for Liam Delap is absolutely crazy. Does that mean I think we're going to get 100 mil for Pedro Neto? No, do you know what I mean? There are differences here. But at the end of the day, like I say, fair play to Blueco. They held out with their strategy that someone would want Liam Delap and someone would be desperate enough to pay 50 million for him. Look, if you're a Forest fan or you know anyone who's a Forest fan or you know anything about Forest, please talk to me about this, because the way I see it, and I've always said this with Liam Delap, if you play to his strengths, you'll get that 10, 12, maybe 15 goals a season out of him, maybe. But 50 million on a player that scored 2 goals in 41 appearances and has just looked like a bricklayer for the majority of it. Do you know what I mean? Wild stuff. So guys, let me know what you think about Liam Delap to Nottingham Forest in the comments. I, for one, am ecstatic. Look, what I hope he goes on and does relatively well at the end of the day. I hope he can get back, because, I'm an England fan when it comes down to it. And if Liam Delap can become an option for England's ageing strike force, which is 100% happening in the next couple of years, I'm for that. Do you know what I mean? I'm 100% for that. And maybe down the line, Liam Delap can still turn into this player. But for the time being, I'm just glad to see him out of the squad when we've got João Pedro lighting it up, looking absolutely phenomenal. Emmanuel Omega is sticking around, so Xabi Alonso clearly sees something in him, because as we're going to get into in a minute, there's more news about Nicolas Jackson going out as well. And we never have to look at Liam Delap in a Chelsea shirt again. So, guys, let me know what you think about it in the comments. But like I say, I'm buzzing. Right, so before we get into Nicolas Jackson, we'll do this one. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Sami Mokbel of the BBC and Nizar Kinsella. Man City are set to make an opening offer for Enzo Fernandez. So the news has been all over the place in terms of how much this is going to be. Yesterday, the news was 130 mil. Was what we were going to get, and that would make sense because it would line up with all of the deadline for the £120 million deal was a couple of Fridays ago, and that's over now, so it's going to have to be more than that. And look, 130, if we get 130 mil for Enzo Fernandez, that's more generational work, to be honest. Look, if we get this 120 plus for Enzo Fernandez, that's actually really good for the club because it shows that if you're signing these long contracts, you're signing these long contracts, and you do not get to say or decide or whatever where you go, and you cannot push your way out unless the amount of money is met. I really, really hope this happens for lots of reasons, to be completely honest. And we're going to get into a midfielder thing in a minute about who comes in to replace him, and that's not even really what I'm thinking about. I just think it's the best thing for us. For like the boos against Enzo Fernandez in the Fulham game were probably louder than they will usually be because it was Chelsea fans and Fulham fans. Enzo Fernandez at City or Chelsea, you would have thought is probably going to get booed up and down the country because of the stuff that went on with England in the World Cup. But there were fans that were booing it, Chelsea fans that were booing him in the stadium as well. And you got to think, like, as a player, you're not like, I'm going to fight my way through this and win them back again. Enzo Fernandez is probably like, yeah, get me out of here. So look, I think it's going to happen. It looks like we might be seeing a bid today. There's been more news saying that apparently their opening bid is going to be 100 mil, and you know what's going to happen. That's going to get turned down. It's going to be that 120 or no, isn't it, at the end of the day? Look, if we can get 130 buzzing, I think that's really, really good from Blueco. But at the very least, if we get the 120, then it says, don't mess. If you want this player, you can have him. This is the price. And it also shows other players that sign these long contracts. You can't sign this long contract, reap the benefits of what you're seeing at the time, and then a year or two down the line being like, actually, I'm going to push out and move to somewhere else, and I'm going to do it for cheaper than you want me to. So I think it is a strong move from Chelsea in order to hold out and say, look, Fernandez stays in the team. Obviously, you see in his picture, he had the vice-captain armband on. Xabi Alonso's press conference has come out today, and he said that Enzo is going to be involved in the squad tomorrow, whether that means on the bench or starting, whatever. It is what it is. Chelsea are literally saying, we're keeping him, but we will sell him for the money, despite Enzo Fernandez, his agent Javier Pastore, are trying everything they can to engineer a move for a little bit cheaper. It doesn't look like it's happening. So if Enzo Maresca wants him, he's going to have to pony up the money, right? But we'll move on from Enzo Fernandez today, and we'll talk about Nicolas Jackson. Oh, sorry if you can hear the rain there. I've got a skylight in my office, and it's just started pouring down. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Jay Tanswell and The Athletic. Aston Villa could sign Nicolas Jackson despite UEFA's 45-day guideline that seeks to prevent clubs from completing player exchange actions. Clubs can put forward a case to UEFA based on several factors, such as an argument that they would pursue a player regardless of the team they played for. So, my kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy for a lot of, since the Morgan Rogers deal is that Jackson is going to go to Aston Villa on deadline day. Now, honestly, I do still believe that there's a chance of that happening, but it looks like Aston Villa are maybe keen to try and get the move done a little bit sooner because Atletico are coming in with big proposals for Nicolas Jackson, and Nicolas Jackson is keen on that move as well. So maybe Atletico Madrid have forced Aston Villa's hand a little bit, and now they're looking for a way to try and get the deal over the line quicker. Apparently, Aston Villa have been in touch with Nicolas Jackson and to offer terms and about the long contract and his pay and whatever, and he's kind of all happy with that. So what it's going to come to, there's kind of three options here. Aston Villa either buy him for the money right now without any, way of dealing with the UEFA situation, and they will lose 65 mil of the Morgan Rogers profit on their books, and they'll, and that's not financially ideal for them because they're always in trouble with UEFA, and they want to keep as much of that money as possible. The second option is they buy Nicolas Jackson before the deadline, and they try something like this where they basically appeal the exchange thing, saying, look, and I kind of get it to an extent, because if Nicolas Jackson was a player from another club for the same money, we wouldn't be talking about this. It's just because of the player swap thing, right? Where they want to, is it inflating? I had a chat with Jay about this earlier. I'm not really sure it is, but they don't want clubs to inflate player prices. So Aston Villa will be like, if Nicolas Jackson was a £65 million striker from anywhere else, we'd have bought him already, essentially. So, and their finances still would have been the same. It's just the fact that he's from Chelsea. So they're going to argue that. The other thing, and this is a new tinfoil hat conspiracy, I don't know how much we're going to be offered Emiliano Martinez for, but if we buy Emiliano Martinez before they buy Nicolas Jackson, does Emiliano Martinez then become the player where the difference? So if we got him for like 10 mil, for instance, and they buy Nicolas Jackson for 65, then we just don't, we only get to register 55 million of the profit from Nicolas Jackson on the books, and the 10 mil kind of goes in. So Emiliano also kind of becomes free at that point. So is there something to do where they can put a transfer in between Morgan Rogers and Nicolas Jackson vis-a-vis selling us Martinez to then say, well, we've sold them a player and now we're going to buy Nicolas Jackson. So albeit the money would still be swallowed up, the difference would be they would basically we would lose 10 mil off of the price of Nicolas Jackson, but that's very different to Aston Villa losing 65 million off of the price of Morgan Rogers. So like I say, I'm tinfoil hatting that one, but it does look like the Aston Villa currently are making the move to sign Nicolas Jackson, and one way or the other he's going to be out of the club. And last but not least, we're going to wrap up on this. It's from Chelsea Dodgers via Ben Jacobs. Bournemouth remain confident of keeping Alex Scott and have insisted all summer he's not for sale. Chelsea plan to add another player if Enzo Fernandez is sold. Could be a midfielder or a right-sided attacker, especially if Pedro Neto also leaves. So a lot of information in here, but the main thing is, like, it seems like Xabi Alonso is really keen on Alex Scott. We reported the other day that Chelsea have already had 3 bids knocked back for Alex Scott, and those were 62 million, 64 million, which is the one that was leaked, and 68 million. So we've bid up to 68 million for Alex Scott. It sounds like they're not going to let him leave unless it's for kind of really, really big money. So maybe we end up selling Enzo Fernandez and spend 80 mil on Alex Scott or something like that. But it's starting to feel more and more like he's the one that's going to come in. There is, I think you got to think, we knew about the one bid when it happened, but the other 2 bids we don't know about. The news is coming out saying that there's been no contact about Adam Wharton, but I think that conversation was had between the owners during the Maxence Lacroix deal, so I genuinely still believe Adam Wharton might be an option as well. We know that we're looking at loaning Dario Essigo out. Can Lavia be relied upon to remain fit for a season? Do you know what I mean? So it's possible that we could still add a couple of new midfielders. I think the other interesting thing here, which I think is kind of wild to be honest, where it says or a right-sided attacker. Like, we're stocked up on, even without Pedro Neto, we've still got Giovanni Kenda, who can play, for those 2 positions at the half space and the right wing back. We've got Giovanni Kenda, Esteval Willian, Marco Palestra, technically Cole Palmer, like for the not as a wing back, but obviously for the half space. So it seems a little bit wild that we're even thinking about getting more right-sided attackers. Like, do we need more right-sided attackers? It seems a little bit crazy to me. But either way, the Pedro Neto money could be invested, I guess, in someone. But, do you sell Enzo Fernandez and Pedro Neto for nearly a combined 200 mil or a combined 200 mil and spend the majority of that on Alex Scott and Adam Wharton to shore up your midfield options and then loan the likes of Dario Essigo out and see kind of where you fall with that? Reece James then drops back into that right centre-back, which gives you a stronger option there, and then maybe you loan Achampong out to get him some minutes somewhere else. It's all getting a bit crazy, and I've got a feeling that this week is going to be wild. So guys, I want to know what you think about everything that we have talked about today. Obviously, the big one, it really is Emiliano Martinez, isn't it? Like, how do you feel about that? It makes sense to me. I would be more comfortable going into the season with Martinez as the number 1, loan Penders out to a club to get first team minutes for an entire season with less pressure and let him continue to develop. Then maybe we spend a year or 2 with Martinez. Penders is 22, 23 years old. He's ready. He comes back into the first team. It all just makes sense. Sanchez spends half a season as our number 2, gets sold or loaned out in the January to get first team minutes somewhere. And we've also got Teddy Sharman Lowe to potentially play that backup role as well, who, albeit doesn't look like an amazing keeper, it doesn't matter that his shot stopping is not as good as Sanchez is if Sanchez is making wobblies and mistakes all the time, right? So, it's just one of those things, isn't it? So yeah, guys, let me know what you think about all of that in the comments. It's been a bit of a wild one for news today, and it's going to continue to be that way. But I'm going to wrap the video up there. Thanks very much for sticking around until the end if you did. And if you've got time, go and check out this video that I did with content creator Nina Christopher, where we talked about Xabi Alonso for nearly an hour and shared loads of really interesting insights and points as a match-going fan. Nice one, guys. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day. I'll catch up with you very soon. Take it easy. Peace.